Welcome to Tucker Carlson. Tonight, things change fast, but it's our job to keep track. It wasn't so long ago that our taste-making class had decided that Andrew Cuomo of New York was the single greatest governor in American history. Reporters who covered him didn't so much ask Cuomo questions, they swooned blushing in his presence. People who pass out Emmys gave Andrew Cuomo an award just for holding press conferences. Over on CNN, Jeff Zucker handed the governor a recurring spot on his little brother's TV show. Yes, Andrew Cuomo is quite a bit taller than Chris Cuomo. For a moment there, Andrew Cuomo was the man, they told us. He was a steely mixture of Abraham Lincoln and Polly Walnuts. He was just what America needed in crisis. In case you think we're overstating the magnitude of the hype around Andrew Cuomo, if you have a minute, look up the exchange from last May between Robert De Niro and Stephen Colbert, two formerly talented entertainers who've been warped beyond recognition by partisan bitterness. Watch as they wax pornographic about the awesomeness, the singular awesomeness of Andrew Cuomo. At one point, Colbert loses all control and describes Cuomo as the leader, quote, the world deserves. Andrew Cuomo, governor of the world. It's hilarious. At this point, it's painful to watch, though, because no one seems to like Andrew Cuomo anymore. He's been Me Too'd for saying naughty things to women. Even Andrew Cuomo's former friends are treating him like Harvey Weinstein. Cuomo has hired, in fact, one of Weinstein's defense lawyers. At this point, it's hard to imagine that Andrew Cuomo will be governor of New York for much longer. No one who knows Andrew Cuomo could be shocked by any of this. For more than a decade, Cuomo has been an awful governor of New York for reasons that have nothing to do with sexual harassment, though that's bad too. 3 years ago, Cuomo's closest aide, someone he described as like a brother, went to federal prison for 6 years for bribery. Last year, Cuomo famously caused the lonely deaths of thousands of elderly New Yorkers locked away in nursing homes. So from day one, Andrew Cuomo has been a disaster for the state of New York, and yet the Democratic establishment has relentlessly defended him. Why have they done this? Well, because he helped them maintain what they want most of all, and that is power. Nothing has made elected Democrats more powerful than the COVID pandemic. They began as politicians, lockdowns made them God. Andrew Cuomo understood the power of COVID immediately. As early as last April, Cuomo declared that Corona law would last forever. I don't think we get back to normal, he said. I think we get to a new normal. Now, at the time, there was no vaccine for the coronavirus, so many people reluctantly accepted Cuomo's prediction. Okay, a new normal. But 11 months later, we have multiple coronavirus vaccines. Infection rates are falling along with deaths. And yet the message from the Democratic establishment has not changed. Your life is never going back to normal. We aren't surrendering our power over you or your children. It's permanent. Now, the media, rather than question this, amplify the message, and they do it for their own reasons. When Democratic politicians become more powerful, so do their spokesmen in the news media. Stop expecting life to go back to normal next year, read a New York Times piece from September. A month later, the paper ran a story with this headline: the first COVID vaccine will not make life normal again. Now, not everyone believes that, of course, because it's ridiculous. The whole point of the vaccine was to bring life back to normal. But the fact that people might live normal lives deeply bothers the New York Times. Go to their website today and you will find this, quote, COVID-19, the U.S. is edging toward normal, alarming some officials. Yes, some officials are alarmed. You might be able to go outside without getting their approval first. They're worried your kids might get an education. You'll notice the Times interviewed officials rather than parents. If the New York Times had talked to parents, here's what they might have heard.
This is the second largest school district in the country. They need to figure it out. They're out of time. Science, facts, all states that these kids need to be in school.
These kids are in mental distress. They have to go back to school.
We can't take one more day of forcing them to sit in front of Zoom when they're not learning and they're hating school and they're depressed, they're dejected, their grades are falling, they're regressing. It's disgusting.
We're fighting for our rights to go back to school because science says that it's safe and the UTLA won't let us.
Kids are depressed and dejected and they are regressing. That's the word from a mother in Los Angeles. People who've paid attention have known that for a long time, knew it was happening. But a new analysis by Fair Health shows just how destructive the lockdowns have been, worse than you thought. Now, the survey didn't rely on questions they asked people. Instead, it looked at the data, billions of healthcare records and insurance claims. And here's the top line conclusion of the study. Quote, The COVID-19 pandemic has had a profound impact on mental health, particularly that of young people. School closures, having to learn remotely, and isolating from friends due to social distancing have been sources of stress and loneliness. Well, that's bad. How bad is it? Here's how bad it is. Among children aged 13 to 18, teenagers, insurance claims for intentional self-harm were up 90% in March of 2020 compared to the previous year. The next month, in April, self-harm cases rose by nearly 100%. Claims for medical help related to drug overdoses went up 95% in March and then to 113% in April. And those numbers remained elevated through the fall. Why? Why was this happening? Mental illness caused by coronavirus lockdowns. Quote, for the age group 13 to 18 in April 2020, insurance claims for generalized anxiety disorder increased 93.6% as a percentage of all medical claims. In April,
I'm going to stop this here. You can watch the whole thing on YouTube. I just want to, my own comment is, why do kids have to go to school to be happy? No, I agree with what was said here about the COVID and the lockdowns. I'm not disagreeing with that. But the whole idea that people are just so addicted to public school, typically more government schools. And most people I know, and myself included, we didn't really enjoy going to school. In fact, it is, even without COVID, which I don't believe is so extraordinary, we always spread illnesses around going to school. Not that even that's such a terrible thing, because your immunity gets built up. But you have to go look into unschooling. John Taylor Gatto, Jonathan Holt, Wendy Prisnitz, if that's how you say her name. Anyway, there's so many people that have argued against the idea of having to go to public school. They're especially run by the government. I mean, it's the worst possible scenario, is to have the government in charge of your kids. Frederick Bastiat once said, all monopolies are detestable, but the most detestable one is public school, is government-sponsored school. That type of monopoly is the worst of all. So I agree with the sentiment here. I just am arguing people need to get a life, Jesus. You don't, just because you can't go to school doesn't mean you can't do something else. Doesn't mean you can't learn at home. Doesn't mean you can't be out in the world learning things. Oh my God, it's just, I can't believe it. Anyway, thanks for listening to me rant here. Bye. And if you don't agree or you want to watch the whole Tucker thing, just go on YouTube and find it.